Welcome everyone. Today's video is on estimating fractions, so we'll determine whether they are closer to 0, half, or 1. The reason we're doing this is because estimating fractions will help us when we compute with fractions. In order to estimate the fractions today, we will practice rounding each fraction to the nearest half. And the first way we'll do that is using a number line because that can help us estimate or round the fractions. So the directions say decide if each fraction is closest to 0, half, or 1. So the three fractions we'll look at are 4/5, 5/12, and 1/10. Now I just put number lines here from 0 to 1, and I also put a tick mark halfway in between, so that way we can decide whether it's closer, whether 4/5 is closest to 0, half, or 1. So when I look at the first fraction, 4/5, I know that I'm looking at one whole piece, and I'm going to divide that whole piece into 5 equal parts because remember that's what the denominator tells me. So here I have 0 to 1, and I've divided it into 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 equal parts. Now the numerator tells me 4, so I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4. So my point would be right there. And now from that I can tell that 4/5 is closest to 1 because looking at the number line up here from 0, half, and 1, 4/5 right here is closest to the whole number 1. Now for the next fraction it was 5/12, so now I take my whole piece from 0 to 1 and I'm dividing it into 12 equal parts this time. And the numerator's 5, so I'm going, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that point would be there. And then I can tell that 5/12 is closest to 1/2 using the number line above it. And then my last fraction was 1/10. And so I divided my whole piece into 10 equal parts. And now the numerator is 1, so I'm going right to there. And I can tell that 1/10 is closest to 0. Now there is another way to do this without having to make a number line every single time. So another way to round these fractions is to think about the relationship between the numerator and the denominator. Remember the numerator is the number on top, so in our fraction 4/5, 4 is the numerator, and then the denominator is the number on the bottom, so 5 would be our denominator. So when I look at 4/5, I know that that number will round to 1. And the reason is because 4 is almost 5. So think about this. Since 5 is my denominator, if I had 5 out of 5, that would be equal to 1 whole piece. And because 4 is almost 5, that means that 4/5 will be closest to 1 whole piece. For the next fraction, 5/12, that rounds to a half. And the reason is because twice 5 is almost 12. So 2 times 5 is 10, which is really close to 12. Another way you could think about this is if you have 12, half of 12 would be 6. So 6 out of 12 is halfway. Since 5 is really close to 6, I know that 5/12 is going to be closest to a half. And for my last fraction, 1/10, we already said that that rounds to 0. And that's because 1 is much less than 10. So again, thinking about 10, I know that halfway would be 5/10. And since 1 is not even close to that, I can tell that that's going to be closest to 0. So that's all for estimating fractions and looking at whether they're closer to 0, half, or 1. Bye guys.